The lightning split the sky above her head like God himself was tearing open the heavens. And Helena Graham knew in that instant she was going to die alone on this God-forsaken trail 3 miles outside Bismarck, North Dakota. The storm had come out of nowhere on this June evening in 1882, transforming the peaceful Dakota Territory landscape into a writhing nightmare of wind and rain. Helena had been riding back from the Anderson farm, where she'd been helping deliver Mrs. Anderson's 5th child when the first crack of thunder spooked her mare. The horse had reared, throwing Helena hard against a boulder before bolting into the darkness. Dazed and limping, she'd stumbled through the downpour trying to find her way back to the main road when she heard it, that terrible groaning sound of wood under impossible stress. The cottonwood was massive, easily 100 years old, and when the wind finally won its battle against the ancient roots, Helena had barely a second to register what was happening before the world became a chaos of branches and crushing weight. She tried to run, but her injured ankle betrayed her and she went down hard. The tree followed, pinning her left leg beneath a branch as thick as a man's torso. The pain was blinding, absolute. She screamed, but the storm swallowed the sound like it was nothing. Rain pelted her face, mixing with tears she didn't remember shedding. She pushed against the branch with everything she had, but it might as well have been trying to move a mountain. The bark bit into her palms, drawing blood that the rain washed away as quickly as it came. How long she lay there, she couldn't say. Time became meaningless, measured only in waves of agony and the relentless drum of rain. Her medical bag had been thrown clear when she fell, its contents scattered across the muddy ground just out of reach. Not that it mattered. What good were bandages and laudanum when she couldn't even free herself? She thought of her father, buried 2 years now in the Bismarck cemetery. She thought of her mother, gone even longer. She thought of the little clinic she'd worked so hard to establish, the first woman doctor in the territory. All of it would mean nothing if she died here, crushed and forgotten on a muddy trail. The rain began to ease as dawn approached, though the sky remained a sullen gray. Helena's leg had gone numb, which she knew from her medical training was a very bad sign. She tried once more to shift the branch, but her strength was gone. Her voice was raw from screaming, and when she tried to call for help again, only a hoarse whisper emerged. She was preparing herself for the end, reciting what prayers she could remember through cracked lips when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Distant at first, then growing closer. She tried to lift her head to call out, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision. Jesus Christ. The voice was male, rough with shock. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Helena managed to open her eyes. Through the blur of exhaustion and pain, she saw a man dismounting from a tall roan horse. He was broad-shouldered beneath a rain-soaked duster, his hat dripping water as he knelt beside her. "I can hear you," she managed, her voice barely audible. "Don't you worry now," he said, and there was something steady in his tone that cut through her panic. "I'm going to get you out of here." His face came into focus as he leaned closer, assessing the situation. He was young, maybe 30, with a strong jaw darkened by several days' worth of stubble and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was a gentleness in those eyes that seemed at odds with the Colt revolver on his hip and the hard planes of his face. "My leg," Helena whispered. "I cannot feel it." "I see it." He was already moving, circling the fallen tree with quick, efficient steps. "This is going to take some doing, but I promise you, I'm getting you free." He returned to his horse and pulled a length of rope from his saddle, along with what looked like a small axe. Helena watched through waves of dizziness as he examined the branch from every angle, his jaw tight with concentration. "I'm Zachary Barrett," he said as he worked, securing the rope around a section of the branch about 3 feet from where it pinned her. "I run cattle north of here. Been out looking for strays that scattered in the storm." "Helena Graham," she replied, fighting to stay conscious. "Dr. Helena Graham." His eyes snapped to hers, surprise evident even in the dim light. "You're the lady doctor from town. I've heard about you. Nothing too terrible, I hope." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Nothing terrible at all, madam. Now, I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to tie this rope to my saddle horn and have my horse pull to lift the branch just enough. When I tell you, I need you to drag yourself backward with everything you've got. Can you do that?" Helena nodded, though the thought of moving sent fresh waves of nausea through her. Zachary secured the other end of the rope to his saddle, speaking in low, calm tones to his horse. The animal stood steady despite the mud and the strange task being asked of it. Helena could see this was a man who treated his animals well, who understood them. "Ready," Zachary called, positioning himself near Helena. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. The horse pulled, muscles bunching beneath its wet coat. The branch lifted, maybe 6 inches, maybe 8. It was enough. Zachary grabbed Helena under her arms and pulled, and she screamed as her leg came free, the blood rushing back in an agony that made the previous pain seem gentle. "I've got you," Zachary said, catching her as she nearly passed out. "I've got you." He lowered her gently to the ground away from the tree, then released the rope. The branch fell back with a heavy thud. Helena's leg was a mess, her skirt torn and bloody, the flesh beneath already swelling into angry purples and reds. She reached for it with professional instinct, trying to assess the damage despite the pain that made her vision swim. "How bad?" Zachary asked, kneeling beside her. "I need to examine it properly," Helena said through gritted teeth. "My bag, it's over there, I think." Zachary was already moving, gathering the scattered contents of her medical bag and bringing them to her. His movements were careful, making sure he collected everything even as rain continued to drizzle down on them both. Helena's hands shook as she tried to open the bag, but Zachary gently took it from her. "Tell me what you need." She directed him through the process, having him cut away the ruined fabric of her skirt to expose the injury. Her leg was badly bruised and lacerated, but when she felt along the bone with as much detachment as she could muster, she found no breaks. "Bruised," she said finally, relief making her voice shake. "Badly bruised, but I do not think anything is broken." "Thank God," Zachary said, and the fervor in his voice surprised her. He helped her clean and bandage the wounds, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone so large and rough-hewn. When he accidentally pressed too hard and she hissed in pain, he pulled back immediately, apologizing in a way that suggested he'd rather cut off his own hand than cause her further hurt. "I need to get you into town," Zachary said once the bandaging was complete. "You need proper rest and shelter." "I can ride," Helena started to say, but when she tried to stand, her leg buckled and she would have fallen if Zachary hadn't caught her. "No, you cannot," he said firmly. "And your horse is long gone anyway. You're riding with me." Before Helena could protest, he lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest as he carried her to his horse. The animal was tall, and mounting while holding her required some maneuvering, but Zachary managed it with a fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. Helena found herself sitting sideways across his lap, her head against his shoulder. She knew she should be embarrassed by the intimacy of the position, by the impropriety of it all, but she was too exhausted and hurt to care. Besides, there was something profoundly comforting about the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, the solid warmth of him surrounding her. "Easy now," Zachary murmured, and Helena realized he was talking to his horse, keeping the animal to a gentle walk despite the miles between them and town. Every step sent jarring pain through her leg, but she bit her lip and stayed silent. "You don't have to be brave for me," Zachary said quietly. "If you need to cry or curse or scream, you go right ahead." "I am a doctor," Helena replied, though her voice shook. "I am supposed to handle pain better than this. You're also human. Doctoring yourself doesn't make it hurt any less." It was such a simple observation, but something about it cracked the wall she'd been holding up. Tears started flowing, silent and hot, soaking into his already wet shirt. Zachary said nothing, just adjusted his hold on her slightly, making sure she was secure as his horse picked its way along the muddy trail. They rode in silence for a while, the sun gradually burning through the cloud cover. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and sparkling. Meadowlarks began to sing, and in the distance, Helena could see the first buildings of Bismarck coming into view. "You saved my life," Helena said suddenly. "If you had not come along when you did—" "Don't think about that," Zachary interrupted. "I did come along, and you're going to be fine. But I need to thank you properly. I need to repay you somehow." Zachary was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice had a strange intensity to it. "I don't want repayment, madam, but I do want something from you." Helena tilted her head back to look at him, curious and a little wary. "What is that? Let me keep you safe." "I beg your pardon, from here on," Zachary continued, the words coming faster now, as if he'd been holding them back and they were finally breaking free. "Let me keep you safe. You're out there alone, riding to farms and homesteads at all hours, day and night. The territory is dangerous, and you've got no one to watch your back. So let me do it. Let me make sure nothing like this ever happens to you again." Helena stared at him, speechless. They'd known each other less than an hour, and he was proposing to what, exactly? Become her bodyguard, her protector. "You do not even know me," she finally managed. "I know enough," Zachary said. "I know you're a doctor who rides out in storms to help people birth their babies. I know you're tough as nails but hurt yourself trying to save others. I know that when I saw you trapped under that tree, something in my chest twisted up so tight I thought I might die myself if I couldn't get you free. That's enough for me to know I want to keep you safe." There was such earnestness in his voice, such raw honesty, that Helena found she couldn't form a proper argument against it. She should refuse, of course. She was an independent woman, a professional. She didn't need a cowboy, no matter how kind his eyes or gentle his hands, riding to her rescue like some knight from a storybook. But then she thought of those hours under the tree, of the cold certainty of death. She thought of all the other dangers she faced regularly, riding alone through the territory at all hours. She thought of the rough men who sometimes came into her clinic, who looked at her with eyes that made her skin crawl, and only behaved because she kept a loaded Derringer in her desk drawer. "I do not need a nursemaid," she said carefully. "Good, because I'm not offering to be one. I'm offering to be someone who makes sure you can keep doing the important work you're doing without ending up dead in a ditch somewhere." "That is rather blunt. It's the truth. You know it is." Helena did know it. She'd known it for 2 years, ever since she'd opened her practice and started riding out to patients who couldn't come to her. She'd just been too stubborn to admit it. "This is highly irregular," she said, but even she could hear the weakness in her protest. "Madam, with all due respect, everything about you is irregular. You're the only woman doctor in 300 miles. Irregular seems to suit you." Despite everything, despite the pain and exhaustion and shock, Helena felt a smile tug at her lips. "You make a fair point, Mr. Barrett. Call me Zachary, please." "Only if you call me Helena. I think you've earned the right to use my given name." His arms tightened around her just slightly, and Helena felt something warm unfurl in her chest. It was foolish, probably dangerous, but she felt safer in this stranger's arms than she had in years. Bismarck was fully awake by the time they rode into town, and their arrival caused quite a stir. People emerged from shops and houses, staring at the sight of the lady doctor being carried through the streets by a cowboy they mostly didn't recognize. Helena could already hear the gossip starting, but she found she was too tired to care. "Where's your clinic?" Zachary asked. "2 blocks east, above the general store. But my rooms are behind it. There's an entrance in the back." Zachary guided his horse around to the alley behind Main Street, finding the small door that led to Helena's private quarters. He dismounted carefully, keeping her secure in his arms, then kicked the door open when he found it unlocked. The rooms were small but neat, consisting of a sitting room, a bedroom, and a tiny kitchen. Zachary carried Helena straight to the bedroom, laying her gently on the quilt-covered bed. She immediately tried to sit up, to start cataloging what she needed to do, but Zachary put a firm hand on her shoulder. "No," he said. "You're going to rest. Tell me what you need and I'll get it. I need to change into dry clothes. I need to re-examine my leg in proper light. I need to make sure infection does not set in." "Fine, but I'm helping you." "That would be entirely inappropriate," Helena protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "So is dying of infection because you were too proud to let someone help you. Now where are your clothes?" Helena directed him to the chest of drawers, where he found a clean nightgown. He placed it on the bed beside her, then turned his back without being asked, giving her privacy to change. Helena struggled out of her wet, muddy clothes, biting back whimpers of pain as every movement pulled at her injured leg. The nightgown was soft cotton, worn from many washings, and getting it on felt like the most difficult task she'd ever accomplished. "Done," she said finally, and Zachary turned back around. He spent the next hour following her instructions, bringing hot water and clean bandages, helping her properly clean and dress the wounds. His touch remained gentle throughout, and Helena found herself studying his face as he worked. There was concentration in every line of it, a determination to do this right that she found oddly touching. "You're good at this," she said. "Have you done medical work before?" "Enough," Zachary replied. "When you run cattle, you learn to patch up injuries, both human and animal. Lost a good friend once because none of us knew how to stop the bleeding from a broken leg. Taught myself everything I could after that." There was old pain in his voice, and Helena reached out instinctively, touching his arm. "I am sorry." Zachary looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Something passed between them in that moment, something Helena couldn't name but felt deep in her bones. It was recognition, perhaps. Connection. The sense that this person, this virtual stranger, somehow understood something essential about her. "Thank you," Zachary said quietly, "for caring. Of course I care. You just saved my life. It's more than that, though, isn't it? You'd have cared even if I was just some cowboy who wandered into your clinic. That's who you are." Helena felt heat rising to her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. "You presume to know me very well for someone we just met. Maybe. Or maybe when something matters, you just know it." Quick as lightning, he finished securing the bandage and stood, gathering the soiled cloths and bloody water. "You need to rest now, really rest. That leg needs time to heal, and you're no good to your patients if you can't walk." "I have appointments," Helena protested. "Mrs. Chen is supposed to bring her son in this afternoon for his cough, and old Mr. Hoffman needs his rheumatism tonic. I'll put a sign on your clinic door saying you're indisposed. Anyone with a real emergency can knock here and I'll wake you. You're staying." Zachary looked at her like she'd asked if the sky was blue. "Of course I'm staying. What kind of man would I be if I left you alone and hurt? You have cattle to look after. You said you were searching for strays." The strays can wait. You cannot." There was such finality in his tone that Helena knew arguing would be pointless. Besides, the truth was she didn't want him to leave. The thought of being alone right now, of having to manage everything by herself as she always did, felt overwhelming in a way it never had before. "Just for today," she said, giving herself permission. "Just for today," Zachary agreed, but something in his eyes suggested he was thinking much further ahead than that. He left her then, going to hang the sign and care for his horse. Helena lay back against her pillows, exhaustion pulling at her like a physical weight. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was a shaft of sunlight breaking through her curtains, illuminating the room in shades of gold. She woke to the smell of coffee and something savory cooking. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was or what had happened. Then memory returned in a rush, along with a throb of pain from her leg that made her gasp. Easy. Zachary was there immediately, a cup of water in his hand. "Drink this first, then I've got some broth heating if you can stomach it." Helena took the water gratefully, draining half the cup before coming up for air. "What time is it?" "Near evening. You've been asleep about 6 hours. 6 hours. I need to check on Mrs. Chen and Mr. Hoffman, and already taken care of," Zachary interrupted calmly. "Mrs. Chen came by around noon. I explained what happened, and she said her boy was feeling better anyway, just wanted you to check him to be sure. I told her to come back in 3 days. Mr. Hoffman also stopped by. I gave him the bottle labeled rheumatism tonic from your clinic stores, and he seemed satisfied." Helena stared at him. "You went through my clinic." "With respect and care," Zachary assured her. "I only touched what was necessary." The tonic was clearly labeled, and Mr. Hoffman described what he usually gets. "I figured you'd rather I help them than turn them away." He was right, of course, but it still felt strange having someone else managing her practice, her space. Then again, everything about this day had been strange. "Thank you," she said finally. "That was very thoughtful. Just doing what needed doing. Now can you eat?" The broth was simple but good, rich with meat and vegetables. Zachary had found her stores and made do with what was available, producing a meal that warmed her from the inside out. He sat with her while she ate, not hovering but present, ready to help if she needed it. "You're good at this," Helena observed, "taking care of people." "Had to be. Lost my mother when I was 12, my father when I was 17. Been on my own ever since, except for the men who work my ranch." "You learn to be self-sufficient, or you don't survive." "Is it a large ranch?" "Large enough. 300 head of cattle, about 1,000 acres of grazing land. Nothing like the big operations further south, but it provides a decent living." "And you run it alone?" "Got 2 hands who work for me full-time, and I hire on extra help during roundup and branding. Good men, reliable. But yeah, the decision-making falls to me." Helena set down her empty bowl, studying him. "So why would you give up your time to watch over me? Surely your ranch needs you." Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes steady on hers. "You remember what I said earlier, about wanting to keep you safe?" "I remember. I meant it. Every word. And I know it doesn't make sense, not logical sense anyway. We just met. You don't know me, I don't know you, not really. But when I saw you under that tree, something in me just knew. This matters. She matters. And I'm not a man who ignores what he knows in his gut." Helena's heart was beating faster, and she told herself it was just the shock of the day, the pain medication she'd taken earlier. It couldn't be because of the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious he'd been searching for without knowing it. "That is quite intense, Mr. Barrett." "Zachary," he corrected gently. "And yes, I suppose it is, but life out here is intense. Death can come quick, and we don't always get second chances. When something feels right, when it feels important, I believe in acting on it." And I feel right to you. You feel necessary. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Necessary. Not just right or good or interesting, but necessary. Essential. Something without which he would be fundamentally incomplete. Helena knew she should be frightened by such intensity, by the speed at which this was all happening. But instead she found herself leaning into it, drawn like a moth to flame. "I do not know what to say to that," she admitted. "You don't have to say anything. Not yet. Just let me do what I said. Let me keep you safe while you heal, and we'll see where things go from there. No promises, no obligations. Just one day at a time." It was a reasonable offer, almost cautious despite the intensity of his words earlier. Helena found herself nodding before she'd fully thought it through. "One day at a time," she agreed. Zachary's face broke into a smile that transformed him, softening the hard edges and revealing the kind, steady man beneath. "Good. That's real good, Helena." He stayed with her through the evening, keeping her company as the sun set and stars emerged in the vast Dakota sky. They talked about small things at first, safer topics. He told her about his ranch, about the challenges of raising cattle in the unforgiving territory. She told him about her medical training, about the fight she'd waged to be accepted into medical school, about the professor who'd believed in her when no one else would. "He died right before I graduated," Helena said quietly. "Heart attack, sudden and fast. I always wished I could have thanked him properly, told him what his faith in me meant." "I bet he knew," Zachary said. "Some things don't need saying out loud. Perhaps. I hope so." As night deepened, Helena felt her eyelids growing heavy again. Zachary noticed immediately, standing to leave. "You need rest. I'll sleep in your sitting room just in case you need anything in the night. You do not have to do that, I know, but I'm going to anyway." He was gone before she could argue further, quietly closing the bedroom door behind him. Helena lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of him settling in the other room, and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Security. The knowledge that someone was watching over her, that she didn't have to be vigilant every moment. It should have made her uncomfortable, should have chafed against her independent nature. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Zachary rode out early each morning to check on his ranch, leaving instructions with his foreman and making sure the operation continued smoothly. Then he'd return to town, to Helena's rooms, and spend the rest of the day helping her manage her practice. At first, Helena had protested. She could handle things herself, she insisted, even from her bed. But Zachary was quietly stubborn, and eventually she gave in, directing him in triage and basic care while she handled the more complex medical situations from her bedroom. He was a surprisingly good assistant, quick to learn and unafraid of the sometimes unpleasant realities of medical work. When young Tommy Carlson came in with a fishhook embedded in his thumb, Zachary held the boy steady and distracted him with stories while Helena extracted it and stitched the wound. When Mrs. O'Brien needed someone to help her elderly mother up the stairs for an examination, Zachary carried the frail woman as gently as if she were made of glass. The townspeople talked, of course. The lady doctor and the mysterious cowboy who'd appeared out of nowhere and refused to leave her side. Some of the talk was kind, calling him her guardian angel. Some was less so, suggesting impropriety and scandal. Helena heard the whispers when patients came and went, saw the speculative looks. She found she didn't care nearly as much as she would have expected. "They think we're conducting some kind of illicit affair," she told Zachary one afternoon, amusement coloring her voice. He looked up from the medical text he'd been reading, one eyebrow raised. "And that bothers you? It should, I suppose. My reputation is important for my practice." But Helena smiled. But apparently I care less about what people think than I believed I did. Good, Zachary said firmly. People are going to talk no matter what you do. Might as well give them something interesting to talk about. By the fourth day, Helena was able to stand and walk short distances, though her legs still ached fiercely. Zachary insisted she use a cane he'd carved from a sturdy piece of oak, and Helena had to admit it helped considerably. "You made this?" she asked, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Last night. Couldn't sleep, so I figured I might as well do something useful." The handle was carved in the shape of a bird, delicate and beautiful. Helena recognized it as a meadowlark, the state bird. "It's lovely," she said softly, "seemed fitting." "You're always talking about how much you love hearing them sing in the morning." That he'd noticed such a small detail, that he'd cared enough to incorporate it into something made for her, touched Helena more deeply than she wanted to examine too closely. On the fifth day, a complication arose. Helena was examining Mrs. Jensen, who was about 7 months pregnant with her third child, when she discovered the baby was breech. It wasn't an immediate crisis, but it would need to be monitored carefully, and there was a chance Helena would need to turn the baby manually before delivery. "I've done it before," she assured the worried mother, "but I may need to come out to your farm more frequently to check on you." After Mrs. Jensen left, Zachary found Helena staring at her medical books, her brow furrowed. "What's wrong, Mrs.?" "Jensen lives about 5 miles outside town, down some rough trails. With my leg still healing, I'm not sure I can manage the ride, but she needs regular monitoring. So I'll take you." Helena looked up at him. "You cannot continue putting your ranch on hold for me. You've already given up nearly a week. My ranch is fine. My foreman is good at his job and I trust him. This is more important." "How can you say that? You barely know me." Zachary crossed the room to stand in front of her, his expression serious. "Helena, when are you going to understand? I meant what I said that first day. I want to keep you safe, but it's more than that now. These past few days, being here with you, helping with your work, talking with you, it's been the best time I've had in years. Maybe ever. So no, I'm not going to stop. Not until you tell me you don't want me here anymore." Helena's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this all week, this growing thing between them, but neither had named it directly. Now here it was, laid bare and honest. "And if I never tell you to leave?" she asked quietly. "Then I guess I'll be here forever, if you'll have me." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Helena thought of all the reasons she should be cautious, should protect herself. She thought of her hard-won independence, her career, her reputation. Then she thought of how right it felt when Zachary was near, how safe and seen and understood she felt in his presence. "I think I would like that," she said. "Very much." Zachary's face transformed with joy, and then he was moving, closing the distance between them. He cupped her face in his calloused hands, thumbs brushing gently across her cheekbones. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," Helena whispered. His lips met hers softly at first, tentative, as if she were something fragile that might break. But when Helena pressed closer, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, the kiss deepened. It was everything she hadn't known she'd been missing, warmth and connection, and a sense of rightness that went bone deep. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I'm in love with you," he said simply. "I know it's too soon and too fast, but it's the truth. I love you, Helena Graham." Tears sprang to Helena's eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I love you too. God help me, I do." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, and Helena felt something settle in her chest. This was where she was meant to be. With this man, in this moment, in this life they were beginning to build together. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Helena's leg healed steadily, allowing her to resume more of her normal duties. Zachary continued to accompany her on house calls, particularly to more distant locations. He became a familiar sight around town, the cowboy who was always at the lady doctor's side. The gossip eventually shifted from scandalous to romantic, helped along by the clear devotion Zachary showed Helena and the way her face lit up whenever he entered a room. Mrs. Hoffman, the pastor's wife, declared them the most romantic couple she'd ever seen, and soon half the town was placing bets on when Zachary would propose. He did so on a warm evening in late July, 2 months after he'd first found Helena trapped beneath that tree. They were sitting on the small porch behind her rooms, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Marry me," Zachary said suddenly. No preamble or fancy speech. Helena turned to look at him, her heart racing. "What? Marry me," he repeated. "I know we haven't been courting long by traditional standards, but out here, time moves different. Life moves different. I love you, you love me, and I don't see any point in waiting when I know this is what I want for the rest of my life." "What about my practice?" Helena asked. "I cannot give it up. These people depend on me." "I would never ask you to. We'll figure it out. Maybe I build us a house closer to town, or maybe you see patients at the ranch sometimes. There are solutions, Helena. We just have to be willing to find them. And you would really do that. Adjust your whole life to accommodate my work." Zachary reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Helena, your work is part of who you are. I fell in love with all of you, not just the parts that are convenient. Yes, I'll adjust. We'll both adjust." That's what people do when they love each other. Helena felt tears welling up again, overwhelmed by the depth of his understanding, his acceptance. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Zachary Barrett." His whoop of joy probably woke half the neighborhood, but Helena didn't care. She was too busy being kissed breathless. Too busy laughing and crying and holding on to the man who had saved her life, and then given her a reason to live it more fully than she ever had before. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Lutheran church, with half the town in attendance. Helena wore a dress of cream-colored silk that she'd ordered from a catalog, and Zachary wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable but handsome with his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. Pastor Hoffman officiated, and his wife cried through the entire ceremony. When Zachary slipped the simple gold band on Helena's finger and said his vows, promising to love and cherish her for all his days, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The reception was held at the town hall, with tables groaning under the weight of contributed food and a small band playing cheerful music. Helena danced until her leg ached and then danced some more, unwilling to miss a moment of this celebration. "Happy?" Zachary asked during a slow waltz, holding her close. "Happier than I knew was possible," Helena replied honestly. They spent their wedding night in Helena's rooms above the clinic, planning to move to Zachary's ranch the following week. He carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests, then set her down gently in the bedroom. What followed was tender and sweet, a gradual exploration of each other that left them both breathless and awed. Zachary was gentle with her, constantly checking that she was comfortable, that he wasn't hurting her. When Helena finally pulled him down into a kiss that left no doubt about what she wanted, his control broke, and they came together with a passion that left them both shaken. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets with the moonlight streaming through the window, Helena traced patterns on Zachary's chest and marveled at how much her life had changed in such a short time. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, his voice rough with contentment. "That I nearly died under that tree, and instead I found the person I was meant to spend my life with. It seems impossible, maybe it was meant to be. Maybe the storm and the tree and me happening to ride that way at just that moment. Maybe it was all supposed to happen just like it did. You believe in fate, I believe in us. If that's fate, then yes, I believe in it. Helena pillowed her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, Zachary Barrett. I love you too, Helena Barrett. The name sent a thrill through her. She was Helena Barrett now, wife and partner and beloved. She was still Dr. Graham professionally, still the dedicated physician who served her community, but she was also this. This woman loved and cherished by a good man. Moving to the ranch proved easier than Helena had anticipated. Zachary had already been making preparations, converting one of the larger outbuildings into a clinic space where Helena could see patients who didn't want to travel all the way into town. He'd also built shelving in their bedroom for her medical texts and added a small office space where she could keep patient records. When did you do all this? Helena asked, walking through the transformed spaces with wonder. Been working on it at night for the past few weeks, Zachary admitted. Wanted it to be ready for you. The ranch itself was beautiful, situated on rolling prairie with a clear creek running through it. The house was modest but well built, with a large kitchen, a comfortable sitting room and 2 bedrooms. Zachary's 2 ranch hands, a grizzled older man named Pete and a young man named Samuel who couldn't have been more than 20, greeted Helena with shy respect. Madam, Pete said, removing his hat. It's good to have a lady around the place. Maybe it'll make the boss here remember to eat regular. I eat fine, Zachary protested, but Helena could see the affection between the men, the easy camaraderie of people who'd worked together long enough to become almost family. She settled into ranch life with surprising ease. Most mornings, she rode into Bismarck to see patients at her clinic, which she maintained for those who needed it. Zachary usually accompanied her, using the time to conduct business in town or purchase supplies. In the afternoons, she saw patients at the ranch clinic, finding that many people preferred the slightly shorter trip. Her practice actually grew rather than diminished. The ranch clinic allowed her to see patients from the outlying areas more easily, and word spread that Dr. Barrett and her husband made house calls together, which many found reassuring. Zachary's presence was particularly appreciated in difficult situations. More than once, his strength was needed to help move patients, or his steady presence helped calm frightened family members. They made a good team, Helena realized. Better than good. They were partners in every sense of the word, supporting each other's work and dreams while building a life together. Fall came to the Dakota Territory in a blaze of gold and copper, the prairie grass turning to amber beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Helena discovered she was pregnant in early October, a suspicion confirmed by the unmistakable signs her medical training taught her to recognize. She told Zachary one evening after dinner, pulling him into their bedroom with a mysterious smile. I have news, she said, barely able to contain her excitement. Good news, I hope, given that look on your face, the best news. We're going to have a baby. For a moment, Zachary just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen, and he let out another one of his joyful whoops before sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. Careful, Helena laughed. The baby and I need to stay in one piece. A baby, Zachary said wonderingly, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. We're going to have a baby. Are you happy? Happy, Helena, I'm over the moon, terrified but over the moon. Terrified, Zachary sobered slightly. I never knew my mother well, and I've never been around babies much. What if I'm no good at it? Helena cupped his face in her hands, making him meet her eyes. You are going to be a wonderful father. I've seen how gentle you are with frightened patients. how patient you are teaching Samuel new skills. You have everything it takes to be a good parent. You really believe that, I know it." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about how they'd adjust the house and the clinics, when Helena should stop making house calls to more distant locations. Zachary was adamant that she should reduce her workload, but Helena was equally adamant that she would continue her practice as long as it was safe to do so. "Women have been having babies and working for all of human history," she pointed out. "I'm not made of glass. I know that. But humor me a little. Let me worry about you." The concern in his eyes melted her resistance. "A little worrying is acceptable," she conceded, "but no coddling. I make no promises on that front." The winter was harsh, as Dakota winters always were, with temperatures dropping below zero and snow piling into drifts taller than a man. Helena was forced to curtail her activities somewhat, both by the weather and her advancing pregnancy. She found she didn't mind as much as she'd expected. The enforced rest gave her time to read, to organize her medical notes, and to prepare for the baby's arrival. Zachary spent the worst of the winter making furniture for the nursery, crafting a cradle from oak with the same careful attention he'd put into her cane. Helena would sit in the workshop with him sometimes, wrapped in blankets, watching his hands transform rough wood into something beautiful. "You missed your calling," she teased. "You should have been a carpenter." "Ranching is in my blood," Zachary replied. "But I admit, there's something satisfying about making things with your hands, something that will last." The cradle was finished in early March, just as the first signs of spring began to appear. Zachary carried it into the small room they designated as the nursery, placing it carefully beside the rocking chair Helena's friend Mrs. Chen had given them. "Perfect," Helena said, running her hand along the smooth wood. "It's absolutely perfect." Their son was born on a warm night in late April, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the entire household. Helena labored for nearly 12 hours, with Zachary at her side the entire time. She'd arranged for another doctor, old Dr. Morrison from the next town over, to attend the birth, knowing she couldn't deliver her own child. But it was Zachary's hand she held, Zachary's voice she focused on when the pain became overwhelming. Zachary, who wiped her brow and told her she was the strongest, most amazing woman he'd ever known. When Dr. Morrison finally placed the squalling baby in her arms, Helena looked down at the red, wrinkled face and felt her heart expand in a way she hadn't known was possible. "A boy," Dr. Morrison announced. "A healthy, strong boy." "He's beautiful," Zachary said, his voice thick with emotion. His finger gently touched the baby's tiny hand, and the infant's fingers closed around it immediately. "Look at that. He knows his father already." They named him James Zachary Barrett, after Zachary's father and his own name. Little James had his father's gray eyes and a surprisingly thick head of dark hair. He was healthy and hungry, and Helena fell completely in love with him the moment she held him. The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, of learning to navigate parenthood together. Zachary was every bit the devoted father Helena had known he'd be, taking his turn walking the floor with a fussy baby, changing diapers without complaint, and staring at James with such adoration it made Helena's heart ache. She reduced her practice hours, but didn't stop working entirely, finding that a few mornings a week at the clinic kept her connected to her profession, while still allowing her to be the mother she wanted to be. Zachary's mother-hen tendencies kicked into high gear, constantly worrying about whether she was doing too much, but Helena managed him with patience and humor. "I birthed your son," she reminded him when he protested about her seeing patients 3 weeks after James was born. I think I can handle examining Mrs. Henderson's sprained ankle." "You're amazing, you know that," Zachary said, pulling her into his arms. "I have no idea how you do it all." "I don't do it alone," Helena replied, going up on her toes to kiss him. "I have the best partner in the world." James grew quickly, transforming from a newborn to a gurgling, smiling baby who lit up whenever his parents entered the room. Helena documented everything in a journal, wanting to remember these precious early months. The first time he smiled, the first time he laughed, the way his whole body wiggled with excitement when Zachary came in from working with the cattle. By his first birthday, James was toddling around the ranch, getting into everything he could reach. He was fearless, just like his father, and Helena spent half her time rescuing him from various predicaments. "He's going to give us gray hair before we're 40, Helena told Zachary one evening after fishing James out of the horse trough for the third time that week. "But look how happy he is," Zachary replied, watching their son splash in the bath Helena was giving him. "Can't fault a boy for loving adventure." "I suppose not. Just try to instill some sense of self-preservation in him, will you?" "I'll do my best, but I seem to recall you saying something about how adventurous I was, so he might have gotten it from both sides." Helena laughed, unable to argue with that logic. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Zachary's careful management, growing to nearly 500 head of cattle. Helena's medical practice continued to thrive, with patients coming from increasingly far distances to see the doctor who would make house calls and bring her capable cowboy husband along for assistance. When James was 3, they discovered Helena was pregnant again. This time it was twins, a boy and a girl, born on a snowy December morning. Joseph had his mother's dark hair and quick mind, while Catherine had her father's gray eyes and sunny disposition. 3 children under 4, Helena said, surveying the chaos of her nursery with a mixture of exhaustion and joy. "What were we thinking?" "We were thinking we wanted a family," Zachary replied, rocking Catherine while James climbed onto Helena's lap and Joseph nursed. "And look at us. We've got one." "That we do," Helena agreed, looking around at her loud, messy, beautiful family. "That we certainly do." The years that followed were busy ones. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning. Joseph was the daredevil, always climbing things and getting into scrapes. Catherine was the peacemaker, smoothing over fights between her brothers with a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. Helena continued her practice, though at a reduced pace. She trained a young woman named Mary Patterson as her assistant, and Mary was proving to be an excellent student. Helena harbored hopes that Mary might eventually attend medical school herself, becoming the territory's second woman doctor. Zachary's ranch continued to grow and prosper. Samuel had become his foreman after Pete retired, and they'd hired on several more hands. The ranch house was expanded to accommodate their growing family, and Zachary had built Helena a proper clinic in town, finally giving her a space that wasn't above the general store. On a warm summer evening in 1892, 10 years after Zachary had first found Helena trapped beneath that tree, they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching their children play in the yard. James was reading to his younger siblings, Catherine was braiding prairie grasses into elaborate patterns, and Joseph was trying to catch grasshoppers. "Did you ever imagine this?" Helena asked, reaching over to take Zachary's hand. "10 years ago when you pulled me out from under that tree." Zachary squeezed her hand, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss. "I imagined something like it. The details were fuzzy, but I knew I wanted forever with you. I knew that from the very first moment." "Forever is turning out pretty well," Helena said with a smile. "Better than well. It's everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon. Inside the house, Helena could hear the housekeeper they'd hired starting dinner preparations. From the barn came the sounds of the ranch hands finishing evening chores. The prairie stretched out around them in every direction, golden and peaceful under the late afternoon sun. "I love you," Helena said suddenly. "I know I tell you all the time, but I need you to know how much. You saved my life that day, Zachary. But more than that, you gave me a life I never knew I wanted. This family, this home, this partnership we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed possible." Zachary turned to her, his gray eyes soft with emotion. "You saved my life too, you know. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Working the ranch, surviving, but not really living. You taught me what it means to live fully, to love completely. You gave me purpose beyond just getting through each day." He paused, then continued. "That morning I found you, I'd been riding out looking for strays, but the truth is I was also just riding, trying to outrun the loneliness I didn't want to admit I felt. Then I saw you there, and something in me recognized you. Like my soul had been waiting for yours. Does that sound foolish?" "No," Helena whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "It sounds exactly right. I meant what I said that first day, about keeping you safe forever, and I'll spend the rest of my life doing just that. You and our children, this life we've built, I'll protect it with everything I have. I know you will, and I'll do the same. We'll keep each other safe together." James looked up from his reading then, calling out, "Mama, Papa, come see what Joseph caught." The moment broke, and they both stood, laughing as they walked down to examine whatever creature Joseph had managed to capture this time. As they went, Zachary kept his arm around Helena's waist, holding her close. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick patients that Helena couldn't save and cattle lost to disease or predators. But through it all, Zachary and Helena faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing season. James eventually went east to attend college, coming back with a degree and a quiet, intelligent wife. He took over managing Helena's medical practice, having inherited his mother's healing touch and careful mind. Joseph became a rancher like his father, taking on more responsibility at the ranch and eventually buying land of his own adjacent to Zachary's. Catherine became a teacher, opening a school in Bismarck and championing education for all children, regardless of background or gender. Helena and Zachary watched their children grow and thrive with pride that sometimes felt almost painful in its intensity. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their house always full of family for holidays and celebrations. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Helena with a trip to the spot where he'd first found her. The ancient cottonwood had long since been cleared away, but the place was still recognizable. He'd had a bench built there, carved from oak just like her cane and the cradle had been. "So we can sit here and remember," Zachary explained. "Remember the day everything changed." Helena sat on the bench, running her fingers over an inscription carved into the back. "Here is where we began. Here is where love found us." "It's perfect," she said, pulling Zachary down to sit beside her. "You're perfect. Far from it. But I'm perfect for you, and that's all that matters." They sat together as the sun set, just as they had countless times before. Helena leaned her head on Zachary's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For riding down this trail that day. For stopping. For caring about a stranger trapped beneath a tree. For loving me every day since." "Thank you for letting me," Zachary replied. "For trusting me. For building this life with me. For being my partner and my love and my best friend." "Always," Helena promised. forever and always. The prairie wind whispered through the grass around them, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the promise of summer. Meadowlarks sang their evening songs, and somewhere in the distance, Helena could hear cattle lowing as they settled for the night. This was home. Not just the ranch or the town or even the territory, but this. Being with Zachary, being loved and loving in return, being part of something bigger than herself. This was what she'd been saved for that stormy night so many years ago. This was what all of it had been leading to. Ready to head home. Zachary asked as full dark began to fall. "Yes," Helena said, standing and taking his offered hand. "Let's go home." They walked back to where they'd left their horses, moving with the careful ease of people who'd been together so long they no longer needed words to communicate. Zachary helped Helena mount, even though she'd told him 1,000 times she could do it herself. She let him anyway, because she knew it made him happy to care for her. They rode back to the ranch side by side, the path so familiar they could have done it blindfolded. Lights glowed in the windows of their home, welcoming them back. Inside, they knew their family would be waiting. James and his wife had brought the grandchildren for dinner. Catherine would be there with her husband. Joseph would have ridden over with his brood. The house would be full of laughter and noise and love. Full of the family they'd created together, the legacy they'd built. But for this moment, it was just the two of them. Zachary and Helena Barrett, riding through the twilight, hands occasionally reaching across the space between their horses to touch, to connect, to confirm what they both already knew. They were home. They were together. They were exactly where they were meant to be. And that, Helena thought as the ranch house grew closer, was the greatest gift of all. Not just the saving from death beneath that tree, but the saving into life, into love, into everything that made life worth living. Zachary had promised to keep her safe forever, and he had. But she'd kept him safe too, in all the ways that mattered. They'd kept each other safe, together, through every storm and challenge and triumph. The end years later, long after both Zachary and Helena had passed peacefully in their sleep within days of each other, their great-grandchildren would visit that bench by the cottonwood site. They'd read the inscription and hear the story of how their great-grandparents met, how a cowboy saved a lady doctor and then promised to keep her safe forever. The story became legend in the family, passed down through generations. The bench remained, carefully maintained by each new generation, a monument to the kind of love that changes everything. The kind of love that saves you not just once, but every single day. And on quiet summer evenings, when the meadowlarks sing and the prairie wind whispers through the grass, some folks say you can still feel it there. That sense of love so strong it imprinted itself on the very land. The echo of a promise made and kept, of two souls finding each other exactly when they needed to. The story of Zachary and Helena Barrett, the cowboy and the doctor, the man who found her trapped and stayed to keep her safe forever. The story of how one stormy night led to a lifetime of love, and how a simple promise became a legacy that would outlast them both. Their descendants still live in the Dakota Territory, now North Dakota, carrying on the traditions of healing and ranching and education that Zachary and Helena established. The clinic Helena founded still operates in Bismarck, now a modern medical center, but with a plaque honoring its founder. The ranch is still in the family, run by Joseph's great-great-grandson. But more than the physical legacy, what endures is the example they set, of partnership and respect and devotion, of keeping promises and choosing love every single day, of building something beautiful together against all odds. That's the real legacy of Zachary and Helena Barrett, not just what they built, but how they loved, completely, faithfully, forever. And in a world that often forgets the power of such love, their story remains. A reminder that sometimes in our darkest moments, salvation arrives on horseback. That sometimes a stranger becomes the person you can't imagine living without. That sometimes a promise made in desperation becomes the foundation for a lifetime of joy. The prairie remembers, the land remembers, and the family remembers, keeping their story alive for all the generations to come. The story of the cowboy who found her trapped by a fallen tree, freed her, and then loved her safely for the rest of their days.